Anyways,
Anyway.
what I would like to do is confirm that Preston is recording. But he is. Good. Wonderful. Good. All right. Well, hello. I'm sorry about all that, Cory. Are you
You're fine.
okay?
Yeah, I'm fine.
How's your day been? Okay,
It's just
good.
been hectic, but yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, you and me both. That's how I live. I get it. Um, so my name's Nathaniel. Your name is, or introduce yourself however you would like. I can
I'm
introduce
Cory.
myself as
I
an
go by
example.
Freud.
Nice. Why do you go by Jungfreud?
That was my street name in New York when I hung out with the philosophers and evangelists. They all had street names, and because I was studying psychoanalysis, they called me Freud. It also means new joy, but it's also the name of Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung combined.
That's interesting because Jung is German and it means young, like young man,
hmm
right?
And Freud is joy.
All right, but they brought in because when I learned German, I remember there was a word for new and it wasn't Jung, but they must have brought in Latin. I think it was like Neu or something. You know what I'm talking about?
Jung, so like young joy, like a new joy, a fresh joy.
Yeah, I understand that. I
Yeah.
understand that. I'm just because there's a different word for new,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
so
It's a more poetic way to say new.
right. Is it a more Germanic way? That's what I'm wondering.
Yeah.
Because because isn't it the word for new in German is a Latin word, so it must have come in later.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know anything about German.
Okay, I'm just trying to relax. Um, nothing, nothing's more relaxing than German. So the topic is magic and eternity. And I remember I said before, in case I forgot, just to get started, now that everyone's apparently gone, what's the most outlandish thing that you could tell me? I'm relaxing.
I don't understand in relation to magic.
Yeah, because you're always talking about like the Nephilim and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
And I was putting my toddlers to sleep, and I was looking at what you were saying, and I was like, "This sounds like paganism, but at the same time." And then you explained it, and it made more sense.
Uh-huh.
Well, we
I
were
could
talking about. Okay.
yeah. I would just say, I mean, magic's just the de facto state of existence. So magic is just the energy of God. Um,
Okay.
and what people I think there's a big misunderstanding in modernity about the nature of magic, and I think one way you see this manifest is a common Protestant polemic against Catholics or Orthodox is that they're doing witchcraft, they're doing magic. Even American Catholics and Orthodox, if they went to like Eastern Europe, for example, and they saw the way very pious Christians um, do certain rituals there, like home rituals, home what we might think of as home witchcraft in America, or even in deep Appalachia, you'll see this too. They would just say it's witchcraft. But to these people, the lines between paganism and Christianity are very thin. They're not as hard line as they are in the West. Um,
In Eastern
and
Europe.
in Eastern Europe, or a lot of like very, very rural places, like again in Appalachia. And this is even with Appalachia, which is actually Protestant, but they still have a lot of these more deep connections to spirits, like indigenous people or traditional cultures do. That would strike a lot of Western Christians in particular as bizarre or straight up pagan. But my point is that Christianity is the fulfillment of paganism as much as the fulfillment of Judaism. Um, and
Oh
what
yeah.
the line between what is just because something is pagan doesn't mean it's necessarily bad. There's a lot of paganism that is rejuvenated and given life in Christianity. For instance, astrology is a big one. Like a lot of people in the West think astrology is demonic, but
Right.
even in the West, this was something that was really back and forth. Like Aquinas, Dante read very deeply into astrology, not in the modern New Age way that we think of
Yeah,
it,
I noticed
right?
that.
But especially once you go into the East, things like this become much more apparent. And one of those things I think people get confused on is magic. And it's not that just like there's a lot of modern tropes in magic that that come out of 18th, 19th century England that I don't want get people confused with. So, for example, one big one is like left hand and right hand magic. And what I'm describing kind of sounds to people who have read some of modern occult literature will sound like that. But that I'm trying to say that's not exactly what I mean. The chief exorcist for the Vatican a while ago said something to the effect that this is a false distinction that makes people think that some magic is good and some magic is bad. And I understand where he's coming from, but I also think there's more subtlety and nuance to it. And a lot of what people would think of as magic that you see being practiced by Christians in rural areas or in the East is magic, but it's not anything contradictory.
The divining rod comes to mind because I was at
lots, for example, yeah.
Lots.
Yeah.
Because the apostles did that, but I was and I was kind of iffy about it. When I saw a divining rod, I was like, I don't know if that's okay or not, even if it works.
Or Gideon with the dew on the grass, or all these weird things that happen in the Old Testament. It's basically divination.
That's interesting.
Right. It's divining the will of God through a natural phenomenon. It's basically science, not in the modern sense of science, but in the more traditional sense of science, which is as below, so above. And that there are certain things that once you understand the nature of how they happen in patterns, you can understand God's will. Now, generally, this is rejected because you can very easily be messed with by devils who are kind of playing with things and trying to give you certain messages, right? So there's a general healthy, let's say, skepticism, or not in terms of its veracity, but in terms of how much you can rely on that. Just as there would be with what we would nowadays call modern science, for example. There's a certain healthy approach to how you go about these things, but nonetheless, there are, through traditions passed down that connect people to their pre-Christian past, these ways of dealing with everyday life, what we might call like everyday magic, or what modern neo-pagan witchcraft people will call house magic. That just things that we wouldn't explain through everyday modern science very easily, or we would just be very skeptical of from a purely materialistic
Your
standpoint.
webcam is lagging hard and fuck.
My what?
Your webcam is
Well, yeah, I know the webcam is, but you can see me, right?
I hope.
I mean, you can hear me.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I know my webcam messes up, but as long as you can hear me. So the distinction between what is, bad magic or good magic. So for instance, in
casino.
Sorry? A lot of what gets translated in modern English in the Bible is magic, is pharmakon.
I can see you.
And pharmakon is a very interesting word because but basically, pharmakon is a word that can mean many things. It could be medicine. It could be a technique, like a technology. It could be sorcery, especially sorcery that involves the use of drugs. So that's where it has a connection to medicine. And then it can be a poison which also heals, or a healing thing that also poisons. If you read Plato's Phaedrus, he goes through a lot of poetic iterations of this word. But in the Septuagint, in the Greek, in the Old Testament, the word being used is this Greek word, transliterated often in English into magic or sorcery. And so often talking about witchcraft, it's talking about pharmakon. Now, obviously, from this early Christians did not understand this to mean just a blanket all statement about things like medicine. I mean, you have Christian scientists later on that will reject even medicine. And to be honest, if you're going to do like the sort of sola scriptura, literalist, fundamentalist view, I think that's a pretty consistent take. Or like Mormons, like no coffee, no caffeine, anything like that. That's all technically pharmakon. These substances that alter the mind.
Get it.
But obviously, the early traditional Christians didn't take this view, and so the question becomes: well, what exactly was their understanding, and how did they deal with what the pharmakon was? And the most direct way you can look at it is it's the ingestion of drugs in order to commune with spirits. So this was a common use, and even a lot of cultures today, of how you commune with the spirit world.
Well, that's ironic. That's what I was saying.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, to the other people.
Nathaniel, fix your camera, brother.
Sure. Here I am.
Yeah.
I had to
I'll do
switch to the phone. Everything I think is complex.
Is what it is. Whatever. As long as it works.
Have you been hearing what I've been saying, Nathaniel?
Oh, for the most part, yeah. I mean, it
Okay.
literally started talking about Pharmacon, so it worked out.
Yeah.
You just
Yeah.
need me to.
Well, I was just gonna, I guess, finish off and just saying that there are specific understandings of how pharmacon was applied to mean the ingestion of substances in order to perform divination and witchcraft. But I think, and that had a very specific and kind of limited use. Whereas now it's just sort of anything that isn't basically materialistic science is magic and therefore bad. And again, this is often carried over into Protestant polemics against Catholicism and Orthodoxy. That would there's rituals, therefore it's magic and therefore it's evil. But again, even Orthodox and Catholics would often be made uncomfortable by very traditional folk Catholics and folk Orthodox who do things that would make Americans feel uncomfortable, I think. Because Americans, even if you're Orthodox or Catholic, you're still basically Protestant. In a way, we're all Southern Baptist. So there's something to be said for that there. And I think we're very confused about what the nature of magic actually is. When, again, I'm just saying magic is just the energy of God. It's everything that permeates creation. And magic from that point can be perverted by wills, as can anything in creation, towards nothingness. And that's when you have things like the way Valentin Tomberg, the Catholic who wrote Meditations on the Tarot, put it. You're dealing with an evil magic when you're dealing with things that deals with oppressing free will. So he talked about how modern politics was a form of black magic, a form of dark magic. Television.
That's
Literal big pharma. Big pharmacology is actually, I think, the most pervasive magic that we're dealing with today. Propaganda, brainwashing, education, modern education. These are all
But I
forms
love
of
Xannies.
right. Yeah, these are all. So like when a lot of people are freaking out, like the satanic panic, the real magic we should be talking about is television and usury and pharmacon, like big pharmacon. Um, Education. These are things that are actually oppressing people's free will, actual freedom. That's black magic. So the stereotypical example in fantasy is necromancy. Well, why is that such a dark magic? Well, not only are you perverting the actual nature of life and death, but you're actually forcing people against their will to be resurrected into this sort of abomination, like a state of life, this mockery of life. So a magic becomes a perversion of magic, of the normal good magic. And C.S. Lewis, if you read him, his trilogy, space trilogy, That Hideous Strength, he kind of talks about this distinction as well with Merlin, and how magic was historically neutral for most of history, and then after Christ, you're kind of forced into choosing good or evil with it. But in either case, that the evil magic is the one that seeks to oppress, to limit freedom.
That's very interesting. See, okay, so freedom is because you give you a lot of information there. Freedom is an interesting topic because America supposedly is all about freedom, and that's kind of like I always make the argument that what is the freedom that America protects with its Bill of Rights?
It's the kind Plato was very wary against. The freedom that leads to slavery.
You mean like licentiousness, stuff like that?
Yeah. Plato says the excess of certain liberties leads to slavery, by which he means the liberty to engage in one's passions leads to enslavement to those passions.
What about freedom of religion?
Well, again, this is kind of like a weird modern obsession, because it's like historically, to some limited degree, right? There in most places, most of the time, there was some degree of freedom of religion. Obviously, there were religions that were biased by the state, but it's not like because you were Jewish or Muslim, you couldn't live in like certain parts of Italy. If anything, Christianity had more tolerance to Jews in certain parts of history than a lot of other places you could have been historically. What moderns mean by freedom of religion is this kind of like the government is totally, in theory, secular from religion, but that's I don't think it's possible. I think humans are just religious by nature, and the government will always have some form of religious doctrine. In America's case, it's Masonry and Protestantism, some weird syncretism of those two. Um, we say on paper and we take certain legal measures to say that we're not we have freedom of religion and separation of church and state, but there's always a religious aspect and theology behind any government, even atheistic ones.
Well, it pushes out open religion, gives the whole floor to secret, basically.
Gives the floor to what?
Secret religion, which is what.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, actually, if you want actual genuine freedom of religion, I think having a state religion is the best thing to ensure that.
Really?
Kind of how like some people argue that like monarchy actually produces the most libertarian conditions economically because it requires the least amount of bureaucracy in order to get things done from a business perspective, versus a democracy where there's all these legalities and bureaucracies and associations. Even before going into something like socialism, where it gets even worse.
Right. Well, that's very interesting. Man, you're a fire hose, and I feel like I'm very shallow right now. Well, it's an interesting. So let's talk about because you're a big believer in kind of like we'll call it local politics. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think so. I'm very cynical of politics in general. I think I would say I'm apolitical or anti-political.
Well, you must mean modern politics, because like you're a big fan.
Well, no, I mean even most politics. Like I would say historically, politics was not the concern of people; it was the concern of the rulers. Like you're born into it, and that's kind of your duty. But for most people, you're not meant to be interested in politics.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I think being apolitical is the natural state of humans.
Yeah, because you're outside the polis and whatnot. I was just thinking like you're a big fan of like Plato and all them.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something they're really concerned with, but they live in the city.
Yeah.
So, well, why do you think Americans are so consumed with politics? It's like politics and religion. That's basically what you spend your time talking about.
I mean, I think that's just a side effect of democracy. It forces you to have a duty, a civic duty, and passive media inundation with political concerns, especially if there's not any everyday connected metaphysical tissue. Even if you abstractly believe in sort of afterlife or metaphysics or whatever, your everyday reality, unlike historically what was the case, doesn't deal with those things. You're not walking around the market or whatever with the understanding that your ancestors or angels or demons are there, for the most part. If you do that nowadays, you're a crazy person. The immediate aspect that is the connective tissue in American culture is politics. Religion's really just subservient to it. So it's kind of what the philosophers called the immatization of the eschaton. Politics is the sort of new heaven, the new hope, the new soteriology. It's the new salvation of man. So man attains, if not spiritual, at the very least, material comfort, material salvation through finding the correct political apparatus. There's not really this hard line view of ontic sin or fallen nature, I think, in the American mythos. It's a very Enlightenment idea that man is potentially perfectible if you just give him the right political components.
So you're like me, right? Because what I'm doing is I'm always interacting with the people up the street who sell grain for my pigs and like my neighbors and stuff like that. And with them, trying to fix the world. You know what I mean? Like, this is the world my children are going to grow up into.
I'm not as optimistic as you, but I don't have children, so I'm not forced to be.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you could call it being forced, but it's not. It's a white magic. I mean, God. The thing about watching children grow up is my oldest is 4. So, like, I don't know how you view it, but my basic understanding is like 7 or 8 years old, maybe 6 years old is the age of reason. And so I've had a good 4 years of examining something that's fascinating to me, which is the development of the intellectual soul, and one thing that strikes me is there's a lot of things that I did not expect children to do, like disrespect me and not believe me when I tell them the truth. Wait, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's amazing. They just don't. They think they know better at 3 years old. It's really weird. And so it's so what that. So point being is like there's all these things, and the only way to interpret it is like they're not capable of sin, right? They are capable of flaws and imperfections, sure. But if you look at it from the point of view of God is trying to save our souls, my soul and my child's soul, there's no chance that they're going to sin at 3 years old, but I can. And so the things that they do, God allows them to do for me, not for them, because they're basically safe from a spiritual standpoint. You know what I mean? And so,
Okay, I'll run
It's
with
called
it.
sins of the father.
I
right.
mean, yeah, we I guess in the East we have an idea of sin as a more existential thing. So it's not like something you do in terms of action. It's just something that you're plagued by ontologically by being in a fallen existence. So a child sins as much as any adult does, but not necessarily from committance of the will. Like you'll notice in a lot of Latin theology with hamartiology, it gets very focused on committance of the will. Uh, and I'm not going to say there aren't theologians in the East who don't think about it in these terms, but it's more so it's just a certain like a virus that infects you, and then that results in actions which your heart may or may not be inclined to. But it's not as connected to the will, which would be the issue about whether or not children sin, is this issue of like gnostically, knowingly, willingly committing a sin. It wouldn't really be the big focus.
Well, they're baptized.
Sorry.
I mean, they're baptized.
Yeah, they're baptized, but it doesn't remove the let's say the karma or the inertia of sin.
Okay.
You're basically just born impassioned. You were born into passion, and the passion's what lead to a diseased way of being,
Well,
even from the get-go as a child.
yeah, sure. But the passions are made by God for a reason. You know, they're in the soul before sin is. They're ordered. They're made to live. They're made to do a purpose. You know. Um, I think the only point I was trying to make is that grace is that you can see things through a child, through what the way they're acting, that can kind of give you an idea of what God is doing in the world at large, even because it doesn't comes from their environment, but also comes from God directly in a lot of ways. And so, like when you said I'm optimistic because I have children or I'm forced to be optimistic, it's not just the fact that I have to provide for them a future of some kind as much as I can. It's also that I see in them extraordinary graces. And they're the kind of graces that you wouldn't expect if God wasn't going to like prolong the world. You know what I mean?
I think I
And
see what you're saying. Yeah.
yeah, and then because I talk about this with people all the time. You know, most people are too oppressed by usury to notice their children, and that's fair. Some wealthier groups like the Catholics have women that have a little bit more freedom to actually notice their children and what they're doing and stuff like that. Um, but so if you take that and then you also compare it to the fact that the world just keeps trucking along in this terrible way where it's like literally the Nile River full of dead babies every day and all the other sins, you know, euthanasia and just the abuse of children, the breaking of the will to like satanic sex rituals and stuff like that, um, that everyone even knows about, that's like obvious. The fact that God doesn't crack down on that immediately is also really interesting. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like,
it has to be like the days of Noah, which were pretty bad.
right. Well,
Like we're not on that level yet.
Well, I mean,
There's a
it's
lot
hard.
of people that are, but not everyone. Not most people. I think
Right.
most people still have very basic charity and empathy.
That's true. That's interesting. But what I was going to say is, if you look at the way God is responding to it, so like here are these terrible sins, right? Which have increased recently. What God has done, it seems like, is revealed it and taught people about it. He hasn't. He hasn't like you know killed millions of people or billions of people in DC yet. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think also, I would want, I don't know if it's true, but I'm convinced to say most of these really bad sins have existed pretty consistently for most of history, usury being the exception. But usury has made these things a lot more far-reaching in their effects, and it's concentrated the most sinful into power in a way that governments historically have not been able to achieve. Psychopaths have always had a tendency to rise to the top of power hierarchies. That's just a historical, psychological, sociological fact. But I do think modern capitalism, which is to say not the free market, but the form of market that is formed out of the combinations of industrialism and usury, has a
Yeah.
tendency to promote psychopathic behavior in a way that no other form of government has. And I
It's
think because of that, we see these kinds of sins on a much more far reaching effect than they have been historically.
right. Yeah, because I worked at a factory, and I remember looking around and saying, "There's no way a private citizen could ever have this without taking out a loan." You know.
Yeah.
So like, if you just have the free market, everyone's a craftsman. Nobody owns a
Yes.
factory.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like Marx says, everyone has a ownership of the product of their labor.
Right.
Industrialism destroys that.
So should we be communists then? Because that's what.
No, communism's still based off industrialism. All these modern systems are based off industrialism, fascism, communism, capitalism, right? Um, I don't really know. I think again, I'm not an optimist. I don't really think there's any solution to this. I think the world's just going to burn, and there's not really anything you can do about it except take care of the people that are close to you. But
That is
Yeah.
the solution, by the way.
I guess
It
it is.
already it wins. It wins.
Yeah. But
You don't have to worry about what the answer is.
it's not the solution most want to hear, that there's some sort of political uh, solution to these issues. I agree with you that it pretty much most of it stems from usury. I just don't think there's ultimately anything to do about it. I think it's just the projection of the way history goes.
Okay.
I think it's a Pandora's box. Once usury is out of the bag in a very large way, like it was after industrialism, I don't think I don't think you can put it back. I think I think the world market has to sort of expend its resources to the point of a near existential annihilation of the human race.
Okay. Um, I agree with you that I am very cynical about a like the government doing anything ever, really. Of course, there's many different governments that are all interconnected in many different ways. So, like, a dude could run for the local sheriff, could probably do a few things. You know what I mean? In fact, they do. I mean, local sheriffs do a lot.
Yeah, in
But
in a in a small way, yeah, in a small local way, sure.
right, and so, well, I mean, and if you throw away if you throw away fascism and communism and capitalism and all the industrial political models that are all very top down, and you go back to what existed in like medieval Europe, well, that is something that built up in a local way, very complexly, under a sophisticated bureaucracy that ran a world empire. You know what I mean? And succeeded. I mean, that's basically what the Franks are. You know what I'm talking about now? They call it feudalism.
Yeah,
And so, and God is powerful and clever and patient and all these sorts of things. And if you look at what he's doing, because I understand what you're saying. Okay, yes, it's all going to burn down, that kind of thing, eventually. But it hasn't yet. And if it does, we should be prepared.
I think it's far away from doing it too. I could see it going on for another few hundred years.
There you go. So we've got a few hundred years, according to you, to respond to this. So, is this, by the way, is your cynicism the reason why you don't have a wife and children?
In part, I've also been heavily considering monastic life, and I still am to some degree.
Right. Well, I've noticed that with monks. The good monks that I've talked to, if I get them nailed down on this sort of thing, I've talked to a lot of different people. Monks are my favorite, and they also have that opinion.
The cynicism.
Yes. Well, I mean, they have an optimistic cynicism, you could say.
No, I will say I'm ultimately optimistic, but I'm a pessimist in everything leading up to that.
Yeah, it's an optimism in heaven. It's like, well, the world has always been bad. Now it's worse. Why not give your life to God? See what happens.
Something like that. Yeah.
That's very. But the thing is you can do that, and the way most people do that throughout all of history is through the sacrament of matrimony. And
that's true. Though I think we're in an interesting age where matrimony is not really the route for most people anymore. A lot of it's just sexual economics has been vastly changed through contraception, namely, but industrialism and usury. And it's a much harder game to play than it has been historically, and I just don't have the energy for that game.
Right, sure.
Fucking based.
So you think most people shouldn't get married anymore?
I think it's very hard to. I think it's hard. Most people don't have the natural pagan virtues that everyone just kind of were bred with historically in society, that not only produces a capable individual, but produces a capable family that's capable of raising capable children. As the psychoanalyst Winnicott would say, being a good enough father, being a good enough mother is hard to come by.
Right.
And
you don't get to go.
I didn't hear you, sorry.
I agree with you. I've been saying to all the Catholics I know that I don't think you can go to purgatory as a father or mother anymore. I think you have to be perfect to make it through this thing.
It's very hard. I mean, we often say it's more difficult than monasticism.
It is.
Yeah. Monasticism's the easy way.
I wish I had known about it. Honestly, I think that God justly punished me, because when I look at, like, and I love my wife and children, I always wanted a wife and children, so that's kind of a point of evidence against the idea. But when I look at some of the graces and things I had as a young child that I spurned, it's like that could have easily gone monastic. Anyways,
I consider you a very virtuous person, though, Nathaniel. So you are doing excellent in that regard.
That's great. I enjoy hearing people talk about how great I am.
Yeah. Love you.
You know, you're a very genuine person. I think I've reached the conclusion that I am also autistic. So I think I'm just
an autiste.
Yeah, I think I'm very highly functioning. I think autism is literally just a man without women. Because
I wonder how women autistics would feel about that.
Well, there's all kinds of. It's a broad category. It's kind of a dumb. It's just like the miscellaneous category. But the people I meet that are autistic, and when people say you're acting autistic and all that kind of stuff, it's like, that's just because I forgot women exist in the world with their emotions. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, because they're different. Oh wow, they're different. Wow, women are different than men. Crazy.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of conflating between pop autism and, let's say, psychiatric autism.
Thank you
like
for saying pop autism. Yeah, the
pop up.
popularism of making psychosomatic responses to shit that doesn't exist for fun. It's dog shit. Don't do that. You just be normal. You don't fall for the jokes. Are stupid. They're funny. The jokes are funny, but you know.
Yeah, but
I lost track of
yeah, we were talking about. Somehow we switched to local politics and usury and industrialism. Maybe we should veer back towards magic and witchcraft, because we were talking about oppression and what distinguishes black magic as black magic. Evil magic is the form of oppression it takes.
Right. You want to get back to that?
Well, I don't know. I thought that's why you wanted to meet, because you seemed to not have certain questions about what I was talking about with magic as the all-pervasive aspect of reality.
Well, you made the mistake of, so you took that word, but it was really, you were talking about Atlantis and a dude being alive,
Oh,
antediluvian.
Hermes Trismegistus. Hermes Trismegistus. Sorry, yeah. Assuming he was connected to Atlantis, although I don't know if Atlantis was antediluvian or not, but assuming they could have gone through both sides of it. But if they were the ones who built the tower, right? So I don't know. This stuff is mythological history. We have so scant things to go on. The thing you can kind of round up a lot of these cultures that seem to have any agreements on this is that there was this great civilization that had technology that was magic, basically, to these people. Like, it may have been something that we would eventually be capable of on our sort of Enlightenment materialist point of view, but it was more advanced than us. They could make stones, huge rocks, float in the air, and this is how
the
they
vibrations.
like vibration stuff. Yeah, that's kind of like what Tesla was talking about.
Right.
But these sort of technology is indistinguishable from magic, and that this civilization was obsessed with magic, and they became corrupted, or at least the leaders did. And this civilization went to some sort of big war and eventually lost because of the intervention of the gods, and it was sunk. And then after that, they sent out sort of their 12 greatest philosophers and scientists, and also many of the remnants of that civilization went east and west to found Mesoamerica, Sumeria in the east, along with Egypt and Greece. That's how Plato tells it, but you get different iterations of this in different cultures. Sorry?
So it was either antediluvian or it was the Tower of Babel.
Yeah, I don't know which one for sure. I guess it makes more sense if it's post-diluvian and it's the Tower of Babel. Because this would have been, I don't know, 5,000 BC-ish, somewhere around that.
Plus also the intervention of the Gregory in the book of Enoch, for instance.
Yeah, so the Enoch would have been, the first parts of Enoch would have actually been antediluvian.
Yeah.
Right. I heard a thing a while ago about the pyramids being like power plants.
Yeah, I've heard this too. I don't know anything about it. I think whatever the sort of modern consensus of it is probably not right. I think a lot of the stuff is very not really well known.
Right. Because the argument seemed really valid to me. I don't know anything about the pyramids, but a lot of these things that they make into like tourist attractions and stuff, like there's nothing in the Bible that says the Israelite slaves built pyramids, what I can remember. But they kind of put that in
make that the
popular meat. Like how
which is funny because modern historians don't even think Egypt enslaved the Israelites. So it's a pure modern mythology. It doesn't align with the modern Enlightenment mythology, and it doesn't align with the Christian mythology.
Have you ever heard of DJ and PJ Wiseman from Michael Gladdy? That is a really fascinating thing. Earlier when I was telling you, I listened to him talk about that. So Michael Gladio does talks on occasion. He's just a private man, but he does it for the Colby Center, which is, I don't know if you know them, but they're a Catholic creationist group. They're great. They only deal with Catholics basically, but their whole goal is to go around and try to teach people about how the magisterium and everything else supports young Earth creationism, and basically that it's a matter of faith, So I like them. I've been to a lot of things and stuff like that. They think I'm crazy like everyone else does, but that's fine. But Michael Gladio does talks for them, and he pulled from a Protestant, I think an Anglican body of work, these Wisemans who were archaeologists. So the father was in Iraq, he was in Babylonia after England took it over and did a bunch of archaeological studies. But anyways, long story short, they look through like the way tablets were done in Mesopotamia and stuff like that. And the argument is that from the context of Genesis, you can basically figure out, it gets into Exodus and all that kind of stuff too, but you can basically figure out that parts of Genesis were written by the patriarchs, and that Moses had those accounts from the patriarchs when he made Genesis. But that's how God gave it to him. So like,
I'm sorry, the patriarchs of where?
So like Adam, Noah.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
So Adam was able to write.
Yes.
Okay, interesting.
You don't think he was?
No, I just never really thought of it. I guess that makes sense. I know writing was invented quite a while after the fall, but
well,
I guess Adam would have been pretty old, so he would have been around when it was.
Well, that's the thing is, you don't know that. I guarantee it. You've heard it, just like people hear all kinds of things. But in that field, they really do not make any kind of convincing argument that writing was invented at any point. It appears like it always was around. Unless you want to go back to, I'm a young Earth creationist, so basically...
Yeah, well, it was in the Book of Enoch, it's given to men by the Watchers, which is similar to how Plato describes it in the Phaedrus. It's given to man by the gods.
Now that's interesting. Okay.
So the Watchers gave it initially as an idea to corrupt men, but not always successfully.
But what doesn't make sense to me about that, I've read the Book of Enoch. It's been a few years. It's probably been 6 years. And I found it very perplexing at the time, and I asked a lot about it, because there's a ton in there besides just the idea that angels came down and fornicated with women. I mean, that's what everyone gets hung up on, but there's a lot more in there.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. Yeah.
And I asked people questions, especially actually a lot of my questions were astrological about, or astronomical about like the moon and how it's described as moving and that kind of thing. And I found out that a lot of Eastern Orthodox people are flat earthers, and they talk about the Book of Enoch.
I was not aware of that. Okay.
Oh, apparently. I'd love to introduce you.
Okay.
Well, I asked you about that. So I was talking to flat earthers, geoplaners, if we wanted to use a less incendiary term. But the guy who finally could talk some sense into me about this topic that I was dealing with, that wasn't just like mathematical, like create. Now he was still pretty mathematical. That's not how I think. But he was an Eastern Orthodox guy. I think he lives in Serbia. I could be wrong though. Somewhere out east. Can't remember what I was talking about. Oh yeah, so the reason why my knee-jerk reaction is, I understand Adam as having this incredible, deep knowledge and wisdom so he knows all these things that no man has ever been comparable until Jesus Christ. So the idea that he wouldn't know to write, I mean, especially if you include like pictographic languages, but also like just alphabet and the symbols that you could associate a sound with, like all that stuff seems like Adam would be very capable of it. No,
God made Adam just kind of knowing these things.
Right.
I see.
Do you agree with that?
I don't know. I've never really come across that view in any of the church fathers, but I guess I've never come across anywhere where they explicitly reject that.
Well, I know Thomas Aquinas says a lot about Adam's knowledge and stuff like that,
Uh-huh.
but you don't
And
like.
well, is Aquinas citing church fathers about Adam knowing writing? It's just not a claim I've ever heard. I'm not saying I don't necessarily. I'm not open to it.
I don't know what he says about Adam knowing writing. I just know he says a lot about Adam's perfection, his intellectual perfection, things like everything. So I think it would just follow from that.
Assuming writing is something that would be included in perfected knowledge. The way Plato thinks of it is that writing is actually a sign of a degraded intelligence.
Really?
Which I tend to side more with. Yes, because of memory, right. So that once you introduce writing, it's basically the gods realize that man is declining and that their memory is not perfected enough to rely on, so that they need some record that survives lifetime and no longer rely on oral tradition and history. And Plato even makes the point that it's actually the hillbillies in the mountains that are illiterate that are often more intelligent than the city people, and that they're the ones who will pass on their culture when the next great disaster, other than the first flood.
I live that way. I live that way.
Yeah.
That way.
Basically, so when it comes again, when another disaster happens that wipes out civilization, Plato says it's the hillbillies in the mountains in Appalachia that will actually pass down their culture, and the city people will be forgotten because they were relying on writing. So writing is actually a degeneration of the human form, of the human intellect. A perfected human intellect, when it needs writing, it only needs memory and oral tradition.
But it'd be capable of it.
Well, no, there'd be no reason to, because writing is something you learn as a crux, as a handicap. A perfected knowledge when it require learning writing.
That's very interesting.
And that kind of falls more in line with the Book of Enoch, which is that this is something actually given to men to sort of make them lazy by the demons.
Well, yeah, you don't need to talk that much about big topics if it's all written down for you by someone else.
Yeah. Of course, it backfires because that's how you get the Old Testament.
Yeah, that's how they misinterpret information, and then they forget what they were trying to do in the first place, over and over again.
Well, I was going to say that about the Old Testament. Well, that's very interesting because I'll tell you what. So, before I was Catholic and when I became Catholic, I was of the opinion that the world would be a much better place if everybody was illiterate. And I was just, in fact, I kind of stopped writing that much. I had a publishing company. I converted when I had a publishing company, and God wrecked it. And so, as much as I liked writing, as much as I loved writing, it's, I just thought, but I kind of had a popular idea of Catholicism that it was for the illiterate, because it's kind of a Protestant idea, is that when you're able to read the Bible, then you reject Catholicism. Of course, that's not true, but that was my first approach to it. Now, I will tell you though, from my experience, and this probably fall in line with what you're saying fairly well, anyways, because God makes all things new, and whenever there's an invention or something like that, God allowed that and permitted it. But I have noticed that with writing, with books, with novels too especially, that there is a higher level of knowledge I can achieve using the interconnection. Well, it's kind of like if you ever read great literature, they'll put a couple lines in there that reference whole books, and it brings that whole thing to mind. St. Paul did that when he referenced like Psalms and things like that. And so there's something really profound about that. But okay,
do that in the oral tradition too.
Sure, right. That's true. That's very true. Very interesting. Okay. Well, anyways, I would really encourage you though mostly so I can know what you think about it, because you're giving me new stuff to think about. Is if you get a chance to look up Michael Gladio, he's a Frenchman. You know, Glade of the Gods, I think what that name means. But he does a good job of quickly cataloging the argument there, and it's really profound because the argument is that Genesis 1 was written by God directly and then handed to Adam, and then Adam cataloged a few things after that. And I think honestly, I don't think it would go against what you're saying. I
don't like the idea of God stooping to that kind of language, but I don't know. I've never heard that in any of the church fathers. That's very bizarre to me.
okay,
Does he cite this from any tradition in church history?
Michael Gladio.
Yeah.
No, he might be running just with the scriptures.
Uh-huh.
I found it a very persuasive argument. Now I know you don't have a lot of respect for me, but
What do you mean I don't have respect for you?
I'm just kidding.
Oh.
I found it a very persuasive argument, and I'm not a guy that believes that scripture alone is, a good idea. So, and it is an innovation. So I'd be interested to see what you think about it. I think it's probably a deeper.
While we're on the topic of writing, it does also relate to magic. There was this idea in a lot of cultures that to be literate was to be capable of magic, and Plato even makes this allusion again with the word pharmakon, which he very explicitly assigns to the writing itself as a poison that heals, but he also means it in a double entendre that it is a type of sorcery, that it's a exchange, sort of like a Faustian pact that man makes, where he gives a part of his soul and he puts it into a tablet, and this tablet takes on parts of his soul for him, and he starts to relegate himself, his memory. But memory is very different in the classical world than it is in the modern world. Memory is very important. It's basically where your soul is. It's not just this computerized, like the modern idea of memory is like this sort of computerized part of the psyche that just stores information. It's much more integral to the personality in classical and ancient cultures. And so when you're taking a part of your memory, I don't know if you ever seen Nightmare Before Christmas, but there's that scientist who takes parts of his brain and puts it into his creations. It's kind of like that to give them life. I mean, it's something very analogous going on right now with AI. But this tablet that has writing takes on its own life. It becomes a Horcrux, if you're familiar with that idea in Harry Potter, where you're necromantically putting a part of yourself into an object. And Plato just straight up calls this a form of sorcery. And he says it comes from Thoth, who is Hermes Trismegistus. Thoth is the manifestation of that god. But he's the god of knowledge and the god of magic, who gives the gift of writing to man. And it's a similar demon in Book of Enoch that gives the gift of writing. So writing was understood as sorry?
You comparing him to Saint Germain.
Yeah, well, I was saying that some people think that Hermes Trismegistus is Saint Germain. But that's not exactly here or there right now. But what I'm getting at is that
it sounds like an evil thing.
Well, maybe. I guess it depends on who you ask. But that writing itself is a form of magic, and that a particularly strong magic, and that to be literate was to basically be a sorcerer, to be a magician, a magus, like the magi who visit Christ. But also, it's that you're committing something to permanence, unlike oral speech, and then also that you're having to put this composition of words to create sound in a way that's unfamiliar to most people. You're spelling things. You're casting a spell. So there's this strong connection in a lot of cultures between what magic is in a intense way, like not everyday magic, like real genuine witchcraft magic, and being able to read and write.
Do you know the phrase "on there"?
On there, I'm not familiar.
On there, yeah. When you're talking about things, on there, and when I'm going to punctuate the end of every sentence, I say on there, and eventually, if I keep saying on there, part of my speech is on there, going to take your brain on there, and there you go. You've heard on there 4 times.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's part of it. It's part of the whole speech. It's part of the whole speech on there.
I see.
I don't know what else to say other than that.
Yeah, that's good. So here's this whole thing. So here's the internet with Discord and all the things that we do to write. I mean, I think about this because I had a good few years in Appalachia where my children were born, and I had them pretty well separated from the world and stuff like that. And yet, in my house, there's all these things that have writing on them that are disturbing. I mean, like Amazon sent a box that had a blasphemy on it, very little joke there, and there's all this like advertising. I'm just looking around. There's all this advertising and marketing on every thing, literally every.
It's on there. Oh, it's on there. It's on there.
Right, exactly. And so it's like, so here we are in a world where, I mean, if you drive down the streets, billboards and stuff, it's just, you don't have children. But this is a problem that I'm actually obligated to try to fix in order to raise my children well. That makes sense? Because it's about, like you said, magic. So there's good magic, there's black magic. Black magic is oppressing the will. So it's about influencing the mind and through the will. And that's what marketing and advertising is doing. You go to the city, you're hungry. Yeah. That's what it is. And so you become a glutton. You leave the city. Because when I went to work in Seattle, I would take a 2.5-hour bus trip to work sometimes. I think it was probably like an hour and a half on average. And go back to this little town outside, like way outside of Seattle. And I'd do sales and I'd go home. I'd do badly at it. And I didn't have any money, and I was trying to only eat protein bars. So I'd take 3 protein bars to work. Well, there were a couple of times, a lot of times I ate out. I didn't make it. But there were a couple of times I went through the whole day, and I was starving for food. And then I'd go home, and I wouldn't be hungry anymore. And I finally realized it was literally the advertising in the city that made me hungry. So
that's called stress eating. Don't stress eat. Can't do it.
No, it's black magic. It's literally.
Oh yeah, the subconscious shit you see every day when you're walking around looking at advertising. Yeah, your brain does not work at 60 FPS at all. It doesn't. Your brain does not see things as a video game. Your brain records more information than you're able to recognize. That's all.
Right.
They hired a psychoanalyst actually to design the McDonald arches. They consulted.
Oh, a wizard. You mean a wizard?
Yeah, wizard. No, actually, when I was teaching psychoanalysis, I introduced it as defense against the black arts. Because once you understand that science, you start to understand how people manipulate you.
Yeah. So I have children, and I'm going to take care of them. How do I do it? You know.
Wouldn't we all like to know? Wouldn't we all like to know?
I mean, I have thoughts, but you're here, Cory. You're the professional. How do we do it?
How do we do what? Raise children?
How do we raise children in this black magic world?
So I will say that the example where I saw the most well-behaved, most normal, psychologically well-developed, healthiest children was this mostly Catholic, but not all Catholics. There were Protestants and Orthodox. And they were living around this Catholic monastery around Tulsa, Oklahoma. It was called Our Lady of Clear Creek.
Oh, yeah.
And these were all disenchanted college professors, very intelligent people who had children and like, we can't raise our children in the modern world. So they went and got farmland around this monastery. A lot of these were like ex-hippies, you know, who tripped a bunch of acid and saw Jesus or something. And so it was kind of like a hippie commune, just traditional Christian. And these people had like families of like 8 kids, but they were so well behaved, and you could have just normal adult conversations with these kids, like about history, literature, geography, philosophy. But they weren't like it's not like a stereotype of a homeschooled kid that doesn't interact with the outside world or like some sort of cult. Like these were very socially adapted, normal kids. But they didn't have any television. For the most part, they didn't have access to the internet. They definitely didn't have a cell phone. So I know a lot of people don't want to hear that, and I know that's not the only answer, but that definitely seems to be like 50% of the battle, is just getting rid of all the corrupting bullshit in modern society.
You mean the screens mostly?
The screens, yeah, the necromancy black scrying screens, yeah.
Yeah, because the boxes and the cardboard and stuff where they print all these images, you can't do much about that. That stuff disturbs me because I got rid of all the screen. In fact, before we did this interview, which is not really, before we talked, is I was playing Seamus with my wife, and I was in a really good mood. Do you know what Seamus is?
Nope.
It's a wonderful game we just found out. Supposedly, it was invented by a Protestant and a Catholic in Ireland. And what happened was a Protestant from Northern Ireland wanted to get along with a Catholic from Southern Ireland, right? So they invented something called Seamus. It's the only cooperative card game you can play with a normal deck of cards. And it essentially works where one person plays rummy and the other person plays Uno, and you try to help each other win.
That sounds sick. That sounds awesome.
It's
That sounds really fun.
I will play it with you as soon as possible. It's been great.
Rummy is my favorite game, so yeah. Hit me.
I love rummy.
I love rummy.
Nope.
Gin rummy. My grandma taught me that. My grandma taught me gin rummy. That's
I
how
played
it is.
500. That's what I was taught. So find it more
games
dynamic.
are another form
Have
of
you played 51 Pickup? We should play
Oh.
that together.
Cory really disapproves of this. So, anyways, what was I trying to say about that?
Well,
Okay,
you're talking about raising kids.
right. Thank you. You're a very precise thinker because you're a monk. So then after that, so I was in a good mood. And then after that, I was putting my children to sleep. And they were listening to a song on an old broken iPhone. And I became really solemn because in Tennessee, when my daughter turned 2 years old, I no longer let her see me on a smartphone or a computer. Never. And she never did. And I was able to pull that off for a while, despite great opposition. I had to leave a job and stuff. But I figured out that when I came to Texas, I was literally forced back onto a smartphone by my employer. And I figured out like how impossible it is because everyone else would just constantly give my children their cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'd be like, "Could you please watch my child in mass so I could pray for 5 minutes?" And they'd come back, and my daughter would have lipstick and a cell phone, and I was like, "Dude." And so then, of course, I would just watch my daughter and try to keep her away from the world. And then everyone would be like, "Well, your problem is that you're too attached and too protective of a parent." I was like, these things didn't exist 20 years ago. You know what I mean?
You're right. Yeah, you're right about that.
Yeah, so what?
You should be defensive as a father. Yes, you should.
Well, it's not just that. Like, I talk to a lot of my friends, and there's a friend of mine, she's married with children, but when she was like 8 years old, she just knew the word sex, went to her computer, was like, I wonder what this means, typed it in, and saw things. And it's like, that's very dangerous. I mean, I've taught my daughter that you don't look at a screen because demons can pop up, you know? I'll be doing nothing.
There's serious adults who believe this still in Russia. That because there were Orthodox saints who said that televisions in the television screens. This was before television was around. They're talking about this idea of like screens that electricity runs through. They talk about how it's going to be iconography to the devil, and there's a lot of Russians and some Greeks who still take this very literally. So they think if you look at a television or computer screen, it stills your soul. So they avoid looking at it.
Right. No, you don't.
No, I think there's truth to it. I also just think I was kind of born into this culture. It'd be so weird for me to just leave it at this point. Like I was 3 or 4 and my dad was showing me stuff on the computer all the time. I was around it.
Yeah.
I think
and
if you have
stolen soul as a result of it, I'm not a stolen soul. That's the
I
one.
think a lot of my soul probably has been stolen, but it's like, what can you do?
What are you gonna fucking complain about it?
Yeah.
Hell,
So
you're gonna fucking build some shit.
again, these
I
kids
don't.
we saw in Oklahoma had such life in them that I just don't see anywhere else, and I think it was in large part just not being raised around the screens. Were you saying
That's
something, Ken?
yeah. Well, I was going to say that like completely separating yourself from like you cannot immunize yourself from the internet by simply separating yourself from it. And what will very often happen to people who do not know how to interact with it and do not know how to use it properly without being consumed by it is upon having like free reign to use it, it destroys. Maybe it doesn't destroy them, but it changes their personality in a way that is not really beneficial. So, like for example, I always think of this story that I know of from I think he was a Mennonite. So he was like either raised a Mennonite or he was raised Amish. I can't remember which one. But he left. Like they do this thing where they're allowed to leave at a certain point, and then they can decide if they want to stay out of the community or they want to come back in. And he was exposed to the internet and became like a furry or something. And trans, like
Wow.
not long after being exposed. So like you need more than just to like separate yourself from the info hazards online. You need a mythology to be able to work through them. You need like a set of stories that you can sort of tap on to know how to interact with that world. In the same way that we do this with children already for the real world, which is also very dangerous and full of images that are very potent. The internet isn't really any different. It's just that it's more abstract, and the forces that are at play are not as immediately imminent. But all the same forces are there.
There's a good priest, a really good priest who I think is in heaven, and I edited his book. He's the one who made me an editor. In fact, I'm trying to write a book. But have you ever heard of the Triumph of the Immaculate Heart? Catholics talk about it.
I've heard of it. I don't know anything about it.
Explain it.
Really? So I'm not the best person to explain. You could read his book if you want to. I don't know if he really explains it that well. But his book's called Listen to Our Lady or Go to Hell. I designed the cover for it. Anyways, point being, so the Triumph of the Immaculate Heart is this idea. And Catholics, I think, who believe in it do not understand it, and they just kind of see it as like a brief period of fun before the end times. But what it really is it's an understanding of the prophecies that have been given by a lot of saints in the West about what will happen in the future. And
Like the Great King unifying Christendom.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we have this in the East too.
Right, so it's related to that. And so a lot of Catholics think it'll be 25 years, but this priest, he said, no, it's going to be much longer than that. And
He's right.
yeah, it's going to be associated with Our Lady, and it's just a period of history that we can't even comprehend. And so basically the period we're in is right before that, and then God does, and so it gets so bad, but it's not the end times, and then there is a great chastisement, and they say we're already in the chastisement, stuff like that, because the church is confused and all these kinds of things, and that's true. But there's also a physical chastisement that's supposed to kill between a third and 2/3 of the entire population of the world, that will involve fire falling from the sky, possibly 3 nights of darkness like they had in Egypt.
I've heard of that. Yeah, I've heard of that one.
And so
yeah,
it's
Padre
not
Pio talks about it. You need the beeswax candle.
right. You don't want to get okay. So, and I won't
Or
even.
just build your house out of sandstone. It doesn't light on fire anymore.
I don't
know.
know.
But he's talking about there's this prophecy of the nights of darkness, and Padre Pio says you need 100% pure beeswax candles in order to see during it.
Oh, so it's kosher. It's just proto.
Like the other
proto
candles
kosher?
don't
That's proto
don't really work for some reason. There's truth to this though. The beeswax candles produce a certain type of ion
Oh,
that are
that's cool.
make it so that they burn in certain conditions that other candles won't. But it's kind of very bleak to think that's literally what he means, because the conditions
If your
were
whole religion is based on that idea, then what the hell? That's just a
well,
scientific
it's
discovery. Why
it's
would
yeah,
that be the whole
well, it's
religion?
kind
You know
of
what I mean?
scary because the conditions where the beeswax candles burn and the other candles don't are like I don't know, like nuclear apocalypse or something like that. But
Oh,
anyway,
so there's a comparative thing that people are scared of.
yeah.
I
Well,
get it. I
you
get
can go weird places with it. But anyways,
it.
I've heard of the Three Nights of Darkness before.
Yeah, so that's only one small part of it. And it's good not to get fixated on that. It's
Yeah.
really good.
No, everyone I knew who was pretty crazy.
Yes. And that's not the triumph though. The whole point of the triumph is it's a promise that God will give a Christian age but after our evil age and before ending history. That's the promise. That's what that is. And so that's what it's about. And one of the and this kind of goes back into the beeswax. So, like, for instance, another thing I've noticed that I've pointed out and people don't seem to care is how plastic everything is. And like plastic, there's a lot of things to say about plastic, but like our clothes are plastic, altar linens are plastic.
It's in your testicles. It's in your testicles right now.
In your brain. Yeah, we're all Barbies now.
Right. And so, and the reason is because it was sold by salesmen because of industrial capitalism that produced this thing and needed to sell it.
They killed the deer when they started putting coal in the trains. They killed all the deer in the United Kingdom. All the deer died as a result of them running these trains.
There you go.
They'll hide that from you. But no, the Industrial Revolution in the UK killed all of their natural deer. Yeah.
Yeah. God has...
Is what it is. Is what it is. Whatever. Not my problem.
I love the English. They're very blind because they're full of mathematics. But the point I was trying to make about it, okay, so me and this, and like the beeswax, because there's some kind of plastic, I'm sure, that they burn and call it wax. Just like everything else in the whole world. But me and this priest were talking about whether or not the internet would be preserved in this triumph, right? And he seemed to think it would. And not necessarily the way it is, but just because it's easy enough to build a system and that kind of thing. I thought it wouldn't. I thought God would take it away. It's so evil. But so basically, it came to be a conversation about what a good internet would look like and what God would purpose it for. Because it seems like. So what do you think about that? Do you think He'll just take it away? Because obviously you use it. Here we are using it.
Yeah, I think this is like the debate between Saint Albus the Great and Aquinas over the brazen head. You know, Albert the Great thought that this thing was like some divine invention that was going to progress humanity, and Aquinas thought it was demonically possessed. But you had two saints with two radically different opinions on it who knew each other.
That's interesting. I've never heard that story.
Yeah, well, I know about it. It's kind of an obscure story. I knew about it because I belonged to a speakeasy back in the day that was called the Brazen Head, named after it.
Tell me the story.
Well, the story is just that, you know, alchemists around that time were really into inventing basically AI. It was a primitive version of AI. A lot of this technology we just don't really know very much about. It's been lost. But they seem to have something like computers. I mean, some people even say the Greeks had computers, or I guess what you were talking about with Egyptian batteries and whatever. But there was some form of computer technology known in medieval times that produced things like the brazen head. And it was relatively simple compared to...
You have a way of telling things where you don't give the background, and you assume, and I just, like, I've been trying to work with it, but I know anyone who listens...
I'm on Nathaniel's side about this.
It's going to be like...
I'm on Nathaniel's side. You've got to explain a little more about that.
I have
Well,
this.
there's not much to explain. Like, not much is known about it. There's just they had certain tech, or I guess magic, or they called it alchemy. So a lot of alchemists were very secretive about how they did these things. But one of the things the alchemists made was the brazen head. We don't really know much about it. We knew it existed, and we knew certain people like Albus the Great had it.
So when you say it existed, so this is something you see in people's writings. We don't have like an old bronze thing shaped like a human head, and we're like, we don't know what the heck this thing is, man. But it is something.
No, modern historians think it's just made up. That they're all making this up. That this didn't really exist. Same thing with like Philosopher's Stone. Anything the alchemists talk about. I mean, modern historians of science, for example, will literally take Newton's writings, where he's talking about foundations for physics, but he's intermixing it with alchemical terms, and they'll basically cherry pick all the parts where he's talking about the foundation of physics, and they're like, oh, yeah, this is good. This is real science. And he's literally getting this, according to him, from alchemical transmutations. And they're like, oh, that's just bullshit. He doesn't want to tell you how he actually discovered it. He's just making that up. This is the modus operandi for modern history. So if you look, they're doing the same thing. They're doing the same thing with alchemy. So they're like, oh, they say they got this from the brazen head. That's just like a sleight of hand. That didn't actually exist. People didn't have computer technology back then. That's ridiculous. If you go against the narrative that technology is, at the highest peak it's ever been today, then you're not going to be taken seriously in academia.
Right. So this is something they're writing about, and Thomas Aquinas.
So this is in like Lives of the Saints. Thomas Aquinas thought this thing was demonically possessed. I don't know if he actually destroyed it, but he tried to play certain tricks on it to show to Albus that it was just bullshit.
What?
But Albus was never Huh?
What? Describe its physical features.
It's just like a brazen head in the shape of a human head. It's literally what it sounds like. And you would write down certain things and you would put it into its head and it would give you a response, like AI. And Albus would use this to solve philosophical issues, theological issues. He wouldn't necessarily take it as divinely inspired, but he relied a lot on it. And Aquinas is like, this thing is demonic. You should not be asking it questions. And Albert was like, no, it's just some like alchemist thing. Like, I don't take it too seriously. It sounds a lot like AI, like the little chat box. But Aquinas is like, yeah, no, this thing is evil. But again, you had two saints, two different opinions on it.
Can you send that to me? I feel like I can't.
Send you just like a story on the brazen head?
Just whatever you could find that makes.
All right, if I remember to, sure.
Helps me, because you know how I am. It's not real if it's not written in front of my eyes in this magical formula. Because otherwise, I'm just hearing it from an uninitiated, and it could just be rumors.
Yeah, let me see if I can find it.
God bless.
I just looked up brazen head Aquinas, and I got Wikipedia where it mentions that Aquinas did destroy it.
Talking to you is kind of like talking to Daniel, the cult leader, as he's called. I don't know if he actually leads a cult, but point being, you have got some crazy cool opinions that you just state and wait for somebody to attack it, I think. And I don't want... Huh?
Oh, sorry. I was just going to keep reading the Wikipedia article. So after it says Aquinas did successfully destroy it because he thought it was possessed by a demon, Bacon, with the help of Friar Bungay, was said to have spent 7 years building one of the devices in order to discover whether it be possible to render Britain impregnable by ringing it with a wall of brass. They only succeeded in their work once they compelled the assistance of a demon. Like Ross' test before them, however, they were said to have missed the decisive moment either from forgetfulness or exhaustion. Having missed it, the head either collapsed or exploded and was scrapped as useless. And then it goes on to mention other alchemists and famous scientists who made use of it. But in that case, it's just kind of like this like triviality of history that like historians have known about, but they've never taken seriously. So like just the idea that you're talking about this as if it was ever real, you would be laughed out of history departments.
That's a great thing to end on. I have a full bladder. A lot of people didn't show up that wanted to show up, and they were talking about.
Recorded it, so.
Well, they were talking about asking questions. Do you think we need to?
I mean, I'm down if you're down. If you need to use the bathroom, go take a bathroom break, I guess. But
Wolfert, does anyone have questions? Good. Then we can end it, and they can ask these questions later. You've given us a lot to think about, Cory. Now, what do you think about usury, though?
I'm with you on it. I think it's pretty bad.
Do you think we...
Do we think what? You cut out, Nathaniel.
Think about it?
I'm gonna DC. It looks like his camera's. Oh, he's back.
Did you say something, Nathaniel, about it? I didn't. We didn't. You cut out.
I said, do you want to fix it? Do you think it's fixable? I think it is.
I think it's fixable, sort of in the way that it's not a natural force and will eventually lead to its own non-existence.
Why can't you just make it illegal and punish people?
Well, you could. That's what they did for most of history. But again, it's like Pandora's box. I don't think you're going to be able to put it back in for a while.
I made this point with Preston. I said, nobody seems to benefit from it. You go, I mean, and that might be a kind of a...
Yeah, it's kind of like what Marx says about capitalism. Even the capitalists don't benefit from it.
Yeah, well, and he was pretty successful as far as like a lot of countries enacted his solution.
Yeah.
You know? So if you have a godly solution, and it's true, the majority of the people, even the crazy furries and trans folk, hate it. In a democratic society, it seems like you could do some things. Maybe you do it on a local level and move your way up.
But people would quickly point out that if you took out usury, the entire world economic situation would collapse, including what sustains modern agriculture. Millions and millions of people would die.
You think so? Okay.
Which, I think is going to happen one way or the other. I mean, I think Kaczynski has already said it better than anyone else can. It's like, this is going to happen. Lots of people are going to die. It's going to be very painful. It's going to be very terrible. But if we keep delaying it, it's just going to be even worse and worse and worse and more prolonged and miserable. So you either bite the bullet now and just accept that millions of people are going to die terrible deaths, or you delay it and it only gets worse.
Okay, so you think there's no way of getting rid of usury without?
No, I think it will get rid of itself eventually because the society it makes is just simply not sustainable. It will collapse eventually. But that society has certain methods for keeping itself alive in a sort of empiric way for a very long time.
Well, it's weird, though, because you say modern agriculture. So it's not the farmers that will die, though. It's the people who eat the food that don't know how to grow it. Because it's like the guy...
I think even a lot of the farmers will die because they only know how to farm with modern industrial agriculture. Most farmers, if you just gave them hand tools, I don't think they could really produce very much food.
That's interesting. And so, like, they don't have gasoline and whatnot, and
they don't have tractors. They don't have all these things that are made by industrial means, which rely on usury in order to, like you were saying earlier, a loan has to be taken out for a factory to be made. The entire world economic system, including everything that falls under, relies on usury.
Most of these guys I know, they also, like, yes, they grow acres and acres of corn, and then they sell that. Or a bunch of cows or whatever. But cows take care of themselves on grass. They don't actually have to use a tractor for most of what they're doing. They just have it because they think you need it. And they have their own little vegetable garden that their wife goes out and hand takes care of it. And then they go out and hunt every year. It seems like they would live. It's just that...
Maybe, yeah, I guess, for their very immediate self. But they can't produce the amount of food that, like, pre-industrial agriculture farmers were making. I mean, it basically would have to mean that everyone has to become their own farmer to survive.
Well, that's what a lot of people are doing.
Yeah. But it would mean the vast majority of people would die. There's just... None of the people have land to produce their own food or even the know-how.
I'd survive.
I probably have to look. Oh, look, it's
Yo, what's up, guys?
I'm glad to see you.
No, but in this apocalyptic situation, there'd be raiders that you'd have to worry about.
Right? Yeah, that's a whole nother thing. The
Yeah.
cartels.
Right. Okay. Well, that's a little bit That's a little bit cynical for a dude with children.
But
So
I'm
what
just
would
saying, like, I'm not starting a farm, and I'm not dying either. You know what I'm saying?
Well, if you can farm, maybe the cartels will enslave you rather than kill you. They're like, oh, this guy knows how to grow shit.
Yeah. Well, that's why I learned butchery. Because
Yeah, there you go. That's a useful thing.
I've got a black thumb, but I can feed an army on a pig. I kill all the plants I ever touch. In fact, to be honest with you, usually my animals kill me. That's what always happens. I start a garden.
That would make sense.
Next thing I know, the sheep are in there eating it. I've got things pretty well figured out. Then the pigs break out and literally just tear up the soil. I've heard there's a way that you can use animals if you're smart.
Yeah.
To replace tractors. So that's going to be.
That's the best way to. That's how you get the best soil, actually.
Well,
Yeah, Cory's like an expert at just like making your own, or at least an expert level interest, and creating a self-sustaining garden.
From my experience, it seems like people do it totally backwards. It seems like if you have animals first, you do way better.
Bird,
you know what I mean?
Late. You're late, Bird. You're real late. You're really late.
No.
Well, if you're in a normal rural area that has a normal activity of animals, and there's no farming happening on it, your soil should already be pretty good because it's already being taken care of by animals. Once you start doing farming on it, like, you're taking a lot of nutrients out of the soil. In which case, you have to supply nature with extra animals,
So
like
where are
pigs.
the cremation ashes going?
Going back into the farm. That's where everything went historically. That's where your poop went. That's where your piss.
I would hope they continue that. But why
Yeah,
cremate? Why not just leave the bones in there to
Well, that too. Yeah,
release
you're
calcium? Leave the bones to slow release calcium. That's better. That's what I would want to do for me.
Yeah, most
I would
people
love if my body slow release calcium into the fucking soil.
That's what most people did. But yeah. So at that point, once you're actually farming it, then you actually need to add animals there, like chickens and pigs and whatever. One, they add microbial food for the soil and through the manure and everything, but things like the chicken talons can just the right amount of superficial tilling without killing the microbial and mycorrhizal life in the soil. So that's how you get the best soil. And you do various things in order to encourage them to go out there after you've harvested all your crops, and you discourage them from going out there in spring. So you need some land in order to pull that off, because you need a part of the land being used for farming and a part of the land that isn't.
Right.
Yeah. The only plants I've grown has been weed and indoors,
Nice.
which isn't very hard. Very hard. It's not. A lot of people mess it up, but I actually didn't do too bad. Yeah, it's the indoor growing of weed. If you want to get like a genuinely good product that you would get off the streets these days, you kind of have to know what you're doing, or at least be really lucky and have enough money to spend on powerful lights.
I won't comment on that. I know more about that than you might think.
Really,
Anyway,
Nathaniel?
I know quite a bit about it too, just from the little. I was only 21, but I had a 6x6 foot closet. And granted, this was before in Florida that medical was even a thing. So, but I just started watching videos on YouTube, and I had I just got my tax return. I was a server at that point, so I got $2 or $3 grand that year, and I spent it fucking all on just lights and carbon filters, and I had to do duct work from the closet out of the roof, and I even bought just the nutrient schedules, and God, there was a lot to it. We even figured out how to seal the room off eventually and use CO2 to try and stimulate the growth in the plants. It was a lot of fun though. I really did. I really enjoyed doing that. I wish I could have kept doing it, but obviously it was illegal. So
That's what my
I
dad
only
did growing up.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
I did two seasons.
Okay. I have to go use the bathroom. So, is it okay if I just call us quits? And
Yeah.
that good note to end on. I think you could apply that to growing food if you wanted to.
You guys want to play poker?
I'm going to bed.
To check on my wife. But I'll send you a message after I do that. God bless. I would love to play poker, though. I really would. I want to teach you
You want to teach me what?
this game. Anyways, I'll see you later. I got to use the bathroom and check on my wife, and I'll send you a message. God bless you.
Bye, Nathaniel. God bless
Cory,
you too. Have a good night, buddy.
It's a lot of fun. I like you guys a lot. Bye.
That trust and integrity are important, which is why I prefer to talk to you individually, and I'm happy to do that if you have the time to do that. But nobody has time and nobody has money because of usury, which is why I'm fighting usury with all my heart, with everybody I can find. And if you want to support me with your time, if you have any extra, please contact me individually. If you have to send me money to support me, that's fine. We'll find the least usurious way as possible, and you'll see a link. There are 3 ways that we can do this, or there are 3 ways that I'm working on right now. There's one bottom-up approach. I'm talking quickly for the people who don't have time. And that involves creating insular economies, which is what you will find out when you contact me individually with your extra time. That's the most important. I'm doing that locally and I'm doing that electronically, which is where you come in. The other 2 are top-down. So you can find a user, you can cause him to repent, you can tell him about Jesus Christ, and then he should fix everything. And so we won't suffer as much. Or you can pass Jubilee laws, which you don't need to find the usurer or do that. It makes usury illegal. It benefits everybody who is struggling, and it will punish users or anybody who commits usury. So, which is not the people you think. Nobody knows who they are. So don't worry about you being affected by that. But I'm doing the first one. I'm researching the other 2, and I'm glad to hear your thoughts.